Tile's obviously about opening content, and what I've heard a lot about during this conference is about filmmaking communities, business models, how you can engage with audiences, and that kind of thing. But actually, not a lot about the kind of the aesthetics or the form of film in itself, and how the digital medium and the tools of the digital age are actually transforming it. So I thought we could really look at that and how we can open the content in terms of ideas as well, and move beyond the kind of traditional form of the feature film and that kind of thing. So I thought a really good way to structure that was to go through some of the ideas that I went through and detailed in a book I wrote a few years ago called The End of Celluloid, which is about film futures in the digital age. And I just wanted to see if people would prefer me to kind of go through those ideas in a linear way, or if you'd like to kind of discuss them as a back and forth Q&A. So shall we have a show of hands? We prefer a presentation and then a Q&A.
It was a vision and then Q&A.
Okay, but everyone else would prefer a more interactive kind of thing? Good! Me too, good, excellent, okay. So, let's do that. So really, I wanted to, look at the way feature film is changing, and the things that you can actually do with the form. We're in a post-viral age, and everyone needs to connect with social media and with audiences, and how best can we do that in terms of cut through and really differentiating your content so it's not just another feature film. And of course you can, story is ultimately important in that, but also the kind of the look and the feel of it as well. Here are kind of, I think, some of the ideas which can really help infuse that and open that kind of content out artistically. I think, for me, the reason I started music video is because I think it's where the mainstream meets the avant-garde, and although there's been a kind of attack of music video in terms of budgets and that kind of thing, I think it's really flowered creatively. And who here watches music video online? Yeah, okay. And does anybody watch it on TV?
It's hard to see nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other reason for that is because traditional outlets are conservative in their approach, right? They're conservative in their approach, and they can't build it out. They can't build it out in terms of they want something which is either a performance video, whatever, and the audience has moved on, and we've moved beyond that.
And
so
the budgets are strong.
Exactly. So making money as a music video director or whatever is just a non-issue. So
It's good for the avant-garde.
yeah, exactly.
Because where there's no money, there's creative opportunity.
Yeah, but people have to make money at the same time. So I think music video is also interesting because I think now that it's kind of been freed up from that TV form, you can actually create more hybrids in that as well, more kind of hybrids between documentary and music video. I mean, a perfect example of that was like the Mike Mills skate video. Did anyone see that? Yeah. It was for Air. I think that's the kind of thing that kind of you can get real standout in film projects as well.
Is that Justin Timberlake video recently? It's like a 10-minute film with Scott Hanson.
And it's also happening at the moment in fashion as well. So there's like, it's interesting that it's not just kind of music video on that level, but the language of music video is inflecting the kind of like fashion videos and that kind of stuff. And I think it's really quite fascinating how particularly the luxury fashion brands are now kind of leaping on to kind of the innovations in the form which have generally come through from music video to create short films using this thing as well. So I think you know, it was touched on yesterday to a certain extent about branded content as well. But I think this, and also there's some criticism of branded content in terms of the bluntness of it. But I think what the luxury brands are doing with the kind of short films that they're commissioning, which are much more kind of emotional things, is like almost a perfect example of how you can change the form. And I guess as filmmakers, that's a really interesting opportunity to work with brands to actually do something like that. I think, you know, the slide kind of I've given here as an example is Chris Cunningham's Flex, which obviously was in the summer exhibition at the Royal Academy. And obviously I think most people here know about Chris Cunningham as, you know, an edgy music video director. But, you know, the fact that he's moved the language of what he was doing into a fine arts basis is, you know, is particularly interesting. The way he's opening up his artistic practice as a filmmaker as well, to move into a different area. So, and I think actually, although he wasn't like really known as you know, an artist as opposed to a director, you know, that particular piece got the most traction in terms of promotion and publicity in the show. So
you mean sensations? Do you mean when you say the show? Do you mean sensations?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, no, actually, it was Sensations, wasn't it? It wasn't at the summer exhibition. You're exactly right. Yeah. And you know, this is another one of his shorts. Exactly. But you know, when it was released, it wasn't like you know, it was conceived as something else. And just, I think Rubber John is really interesting in terms of moving the actual formats that can be used, and the fact that this was done on consumer level stuff. And again, you know, there's a lot of talk about using cheap video equipment in terms of for costs and the ability to do it, but actually using, you know, different formats for their aesthetic appeal as well, and using night vision within that is, you know, it's an area which hasn't really been looked at. Has anybody got projects that have kind of engaged with that, or that are doing, you know, which they could engage with?
Well, I'm about to do a project which uses spy cameras.
Yeah.
So this is point of view, so I want the actors to wear the camera. So the whole film is about this point of view.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the project?
Well, the idea is to have the point of view from a man and a woman, and then I don't have like, I'm working on a storyline now, but primarily is to the audience who visits the site, you can pick what point of view to see. That's basically in a nutshell.
Okay. Okay.
It's a complete experiment.
Which is cool. That's what DVD promised and didn't deliver, isn't it?
Right.
And do you think, are you, is that just following the story though, or are you, you know, using that particular thing in to kind of to get some differentiation as well as for your film?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is to let the audience kind of like follow what character wants to be in. Going further, the goal is to have both point of views in real time, so you kind of switch what these actors view,
Yeah.
whereas at some point they connect.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. I think there's another kind of slide which kind of looks at that as well a bit later. So you can. So we kind of, that's interesting because kind of touched on it in a way. Like everyone has thought about, you know, film as like a linear experience, and you know, the fact that you can, you know, take a feature film and put it into a live context as well is fascinating. Now, you know, some people do that on a level of making, you know, events-driven stuff around the film, but you know, also if we can take the raw materials for the content and the film and put it into a live context, whether that's as, you know, a VJ context or a performance, then I think that's another really interesting area for artistic expression. And this is like an old project that I did when I was at 1.0 actually, which looked at that. And 1.0 was a digital film festival that I created, which looked at, again, at the fresh and moving image forms, and we wanted to see how you know, the certain environments could be altered in a filmic way. So we worked with the light surgeons to create a live expressionistic feature film, because they wanted to kind of reverse engineer the process of making a film, and you know, it was originally envisaged as a longer piece, as like they wanted a traditional film at the end of the process, and to do that, they actually rough cut it, if you like, as a performance, and then we conceived the idea of slotting in kind of short films into it as sections, and then those could actually be added together. So I think, you know, that's another area which hasn't really been kind of touched on by people, in terms of there was a lot of exposure for that. It generated a lot of excitement for the audience, and obviously as a live event as well, because there's music there too, but actually innovating for them with the form and taking what they'd learned in the kind of VG area aesthetically, and putting that and then feeding that into a feature film and short films. I think that it was a very satisfying end result, and I think you can see some of those short films on YouTube as well. I think, has anybody seen any of these trailer remixes on YouTube? I think this is the most interesting example of it, Scary Mary. So, has anyone seen it?
I've seen many, but I haven't seen that.
Yeah, this is my favourite one, actually. Sorry?
I was in brought back to the future or something.
Yeah, I think I've heard that too. But I think, again, I think it's an area where it's interesting at the moment in terms of these are all non-kind of official remixes, and it's quite a common film school kind of exercise now to actually recut these trailers together in a completely different context, but actually releasing that footage out there and doing it as an exercise to engage with your community and audience, to create something different, and to kind of crowdsource that creative process. Again, it hasn't been done. It's like another really interesting area to explore with your own project. Now, I think most traditional filmmakers aren't really engaging with this, and one of the few people that has done that is David Lynch. And although I show a slide here for Inland Empire, his last film, the reason, which is kind of a traditional, film in terms of its formatting and stuff. The the reason I show it is because actually he used some footage within it of the rabbits. Has anyone seen the film? So, okay. Let me give you a little explanation on it then. It's like, it's the usual David Lynch film with, with you know, memory loss and that whole thing. And kind of intercut within it, there's these really strange vignettes of people dressed up as rabbits. And he filmed those in his backyard in LA, but he actually put them on his website first. So they weren't part of this project. They weren't part of Inland Empire. He hadn't conceived of Inland Empire before. What he had conceived of was just doing a series of short films, of weird short films based around rabbits, and you could subscribe to his website and get this original content first. So I think it's quite fascinating how those experiments, which weren't really about finding an audience at all, for him, it was much more about personal exploration. He found a way to actually incorporate that in a commercial project, if you can ever call David Lynch's projects commercial. He found a way to actually feed it in to the form. So he's one of the kind of the few traditional filmmakers that's doing it. No, I was never a really big fan of video art, but in the last few years, this is a still from Matthew Barney's his last film, and that's Bjork there as well. And I think now it's got to a certain level of video art in terms of the production and the ambition of moving it kind of not out of a gallery space, but kind of infusing a much more fine art aesthetic and production values into traditional film. And Matthew Barney's kind of leading the way in that. And it's funny that it takes someone out of traditional feature filmmaking to actually really integrate, these other forms. And he's done that with, he's done a series of films called the Cremaster series. And Cremaster 3 was actually filmed entirely in the Guggenheim in New York. But if you look at that work, then he takes the language of video games and incorporates it in the space. So again, not many people are doing that, but there's video gaming is such a huge area. The aesthetics of it, usually by traditional filmmakers, it feels like it's shoehorned into the film, and like kind of the biggest kind of mistake, if you like, that I saw someone do that was, I think it was in The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio, kind of going through the jungle, and it was like a pseudo video game thing, and it was just really terrible. But Matthew Barney does it really well, and he's got kind of uses motion graphics to create pop-ups and kind of level ups and that kind of thing with the character going through that space.
You forgot the first 2 hours of the film, which take place in Chrysler Building.
Well, yeah, this is actually the order, which is because I mean that's the other thing that's interesting, because this is the short attention span version. So Cremaster's, they had problems releasing the full version of it because obviously he's in the fine art area. So there's not a typical distribution of it. But I think the only thing they could do was actually release a shortened version of it, and that has kind of those elements much more integrated. So. pop at you more. I think this is like a fascinating area. Talk about a video walk, and this is really dealing with Janet Cardiff's work. And is anyone here familiar with her work? No? Okay, I'll tell you that. Again, this is coming from a very kind of an arts background, and it's taken someone from an arts background again to kind of innovate in the film form. And she basically, one of the most powerful cinematic experiences I've ever had is with this piece, and it's actually location-specific film. And she's done that in a number of locations around the world. The one I experienced it with was at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And she uses the mobile screen, so you take a video recorder like you see here, and rather than it recording anything, you use it as a playback device. So it's interesting that it's actually innovating with the device as well as the form. And so you put on headphones, and they're binaural headphones, so you get a really 3D sound experience as well. And so it's playing back the movie that she's recorded and she's produced, and the device actually pulls you through the space, and you follow the image that's on the screen, and point it in the same place in the space. And it's a really kind of fascinating experience, because you're not a viewer, you become like a participant in the film and complicit in it. Janet Cardiff. So yeah, she's a Canadian artist, and she usually works with sound. And I think you can actually, she started doing these kind of location-specific pieces, media pieces in the sound arena. And I think at Whitechapel, you can still actually, at the Whitechapel Gallery, you can still actually take one of her tours, and she tours around Whitechapel and, tells a story just with audio. And she has to give you explicit directions. But the fascinating thing about when it's moved to video is the fact that you don't need the directions. She tells you right at the start, and then you just get it, and it becomes like second nature to you. And much more than that, I think the really exciting thing is the fact that the screen that you're viewing, even though it's what we're in now is obviously our real primary experience, it's flipped. That screen that you're viewing becomes your primary experience, and the world that you're walking in around you becomes a secondary experience. And there's like this really weird disconnect, which completely flips your expectations as well of what cinema is about, and it becomes a much more emotional, intense experience as well. And so I think this is another burgeoning area, that like locative art or location-based stuff. And again, I think there's masses of like artistic possibilities for filmmakers to engage more directly with their locations and be geographic specific. You don't have to do it in this sense, but but to actually unlock media or content around a specific geographical location where a film might have been set is really interesting. And you can, Janet Cardiff puts it in a much more artistic framework, but what she's doing is even more kind of a deeper engagement. It's even more immersive than that. One of the things she does while you're kind of walking through the gallery, pulled along by the camera, is so you're kind of barging people out of the way because it's your primary experience, and people are like, what the hell are you doing? But she takes you into places you wouldn't necessarily go in those locations. So you go into like a private zone. So you know, it's kind of, it's fascinating on that level as well. So I think, you know, talking about unlocking the media around, you know, traditional films or being much more kind of geographic specific, you can see on the billboard there, you know, a QR code. So this is, you know, it's a much more kind of lo-fi, if you like, way of engaging with location-specific stuff. So you might not necessarily, as a filmmaker, need to be in that space and create something specific to that location, but you actually can use the location to unlock something, so people actually have to go to that location. And you know, that's could be interesting in terms of promotional use, or creating, you know, kind of flash mob type events and things. So, and you know, QR code's been around for a long time, but I think, you know, now with like mobile devices, we kind of finally there's like less friction to its use, and I haven't got a visual for it, but I think the 28 days later they used like a massive QR code as well to unlock specific content. So those kind of the best kind of more mainstream feature film that I can give you as an example of it.
I've actually used them in video, like in actual sequences, so people even in the cinema can shoot them, or online, so you can actually lay them into video.
Yeah.
And use it that way too.
Yeah.
It's a video I saw recently that uses it as a style reference as well. I think it's a frame that keeps kind of dissolving and then turning into a shot code and then back again through use of black and white. I think it might be Pet Shop Boys.
Yeah, no, you're right. There is a Pet Shop Boys one, which I think is customized code as well, because I think you can make kind of more. There used to be kind of more abstract patterns just like this, but I think you can actually make them more pictorial now, as well. Yeah. So no, this actual, not just picture messaging. Sorry, the
picture recognition is what it's.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So. And that, you know, that's really, Lance, that's really interesting idea, because it kind of goes beyond the kind of primary viewing of something to, you know, if people want to go further into it, they're fans of it, yeah, they can, and they're watching it off the cinema screen on whatever device, then actually they're rewarded, aren't they, by using that code or whatever. It's a really nice kind of level of engagement of being able to unlock more content out of the traditional film, and that's not location specific though. It's just a different kind of input or kind of reward device, isn't it? So yeah, it's good. I told you. So yeah, and this is another way. This is. Lance is here, who did the Cinema ARG, the alternate reality game, you know, which I'm referring to here, which is called Head Trauma, which is you know, a horror film, and the fact that you can actually build a story up around your feature film form as an alternate reality game, again, to like you build community and promotion, but not only do that, but actually to extend the story world as well is a really fascinating one. And you know, it's a fascinating avenue. And I think Lance's, you know, I wish you weren't here now actually, because I'm praising you too much. But you know, the way that, the way that Lance actually constructed it as well to use. Mobile phones within the experience as well was very interesting, in terms of being able to view something online, and if you'd inputted your details before, then in terms of your phone number and stuff, if you clicked out of the kind of the webcomic that you were watching, then it would call you. There was a piece of software that allowed, I'm getting this right, that would call you back up, would call you up on your cell phone and tell you not to actually, to keep watching and not to leave the website. So I think it's kind of really fascinating in terms of, again, opening out the experience and making it more cinematic in a much more kind of general sense, you know, in a much more kind of broader sense of what the experience can be. This is a term I came up with to describe what's more generally kind of considered transmedia storytelling. The idea, when it was kind of touched on with the idea of ARGs, in terms of what you can do with a film to move that world offline and to extend that world offline. This is a still from Tulsa Suitcases by Peter Greenaway, and I think Peter Greenaway is really undervalued as one of our kind of great British directors in the way that he innovates with the form in itself. You know, he's always engaged with the digital technologies and how that can kind of impact on the screen. But more than that, he's always been involved in, I guess because of his kind of much more artistic kind of leanings and his engagement with the art field, that he's actually done installations as well, and based around the story and based around you know, the film. So with Tulsa Suitcases, he actually, you could explore all the suitcases. There was an installation of it, you know, so you could actually explore it as a real world thing, but also interactively as well. So you could again go deeper into the story and you know, engage with it more. And this is kind of less like moving back now from like going back to the screen. This is a still from My Little Eye. It's a really great little British horror film, which I loved, and it's one of the few films, again, which is innovating with the frame. So but not in an overt way, not in like a very kind of fine art way. It's kind of integrated into the story. So, you know, with My Little Eye, it's kind of based around the idea of a reality game show, and people arrive at a house, and they think whoever's, you know, they're going to live in it for a couple of weeks, and you know, they're going to get eliminated, and somebody's going to be the winner, and people are watching them online, and obviously things go wrong, and it becomes much more of like, okay, who's going to actually survive in this house? So the reason this is interesting for me is because the premise was that they're always being looked at as inside the house with the CCTV, that he used a lot of the CCTV footage within it, and used remote control cameras, and he actually used that footage. So rather than the kind of usual feature film thing where you see the camera and there's an obvious shot which doesn't feel native, it doesn't feel like it's native CCTV, it's obviously being treated that way. In this film, they just use the texture of it to give it more, to give it a more authentic feel.
Is that how it's shown? Is it shown before?
Yeah. So, so you have the kind of traditional, the traditional way it's shot, where it's full frame and everything. But then during it, No, not like timecode. Yeah, but timecode is a similar thing, but timecode is much more of a conceit in terms of here you just have, he intercuts the CCTV in the footage and you get all the cameras at once. It's called My Little Eye.
My Little Eye?
Sorry, My Little Eye.
My Little Eye.
Yeah.
Is it a British film? Or?
Yeah. I'm surprised you haven't seen it, actually.
No.
Yeah. Should check it out. The good thing about this technique as well is that he actually moves that. So you get it in the main film, but he actually moves that forward one step as well. So when the DVD was released, he did this thing which I call slipstreaming with the media, and you know, we're kind of, you know, traveling to, you know, post-DVD world now in a way, but I think one of the things that hasn't been really explored with DVD was the alternate angles in them, and the fact that you've got like multiple video streams. And what they did with the DVD release is actually they had that CCTV footage, and because it was obviously video as well, they recorded a lot of it. You could watch a scene in the movie as it was originally filmed and presented, but then by using the angle control, you could see the CCTV footage as well. So you could actually, it was like a twin track, and it was like a parallel viewing. So that's why I call it kind of slipstreaming. There's a slipstream of, you know, another media channel or another video channel, which is part of it. So again, it's not really been used, and you know, by people. So it's another way to think about how you can do something with a project which is more innovative like that. And I think, for me, that what he did with My Little Eye was almost the most basic level of what you can do, because you can also think about it in terms of you know, characters' point of views, you know, to kind of engage with your project. If you know the people have got, you know, fisheye, you know, cameras that they've got on their person, you can see it from their point of view, kind of directly, the scene, or you know, you could create a stream which was much more emotional, or which had a different aesthetic.
Innovation comes in its simplicity in a way, doesn't it? Because when I first bought DVDs, that's what it was offering. And the first few that I bought had angles, but I imagine that it was quite a high-cost production for some movie houses, and those kind of enhancements dropped away. Whereas what this guy's done is something that he's used the footage, low-grade footage, that he's used for editing his film together, and offered that back to the consumers in almost like an insight.
Yeah.
And it hasn't cost a great deal to add in.
Yeah, no, he hasn't edited it. So basically, all you have to do is, you know, he'd got that footage and just sync.
Trigger it.
Yeah, he just had to sync it up with the scene or whatever, and trigger it. So, you know.
You choose when you add it.
Sorry.
You watch the film and you can choose when you add.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you don't have to add anything, but you can choose when you switch your viewing.
Like the
Yeah.
red button on digital,
Yeah.
which is offering the same, but people aren't using it.
So you watch it on one screen and then you press the button and there's more than one screen. So
No, it keeps. You change your viewing. It's like flicking a channel, but you're seeing the same thing. So,
Different angle.
for example, if you would,
So
you.
like when you don't have it on football matches, you can choose what camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's technology that's around, it's
Yeah.
just that he's used it in a really simple
Yeah.
way without spending a great deal of money. You know, and most other people have stopped doing that because it costs them.
And you could, you know, and it's really easy to do for live events, because obviously you've got the
Yeah.
cameras there anyway. But to do it in, you know, much more fictional
Yeah.
context is interesting. I think, you know, interesting maybe to do it in a context which is non-fiction, and which may be like a documentary-based thing as well. There's a great project which was part of the Dogma, you know, the whole Dogma thing in Denmark. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. One of the Dogma filmmakers, I think, in New Year's, they worked with the state broadcaster and actually did a drama which was, which was at the same time, and it was kind of live, so it was improvised by actors, and they had live. It was live, and they had cameramen following those actors around, but they followed different characters. There's like 4 of them, and they followed different characters, and you could actually switch your TV. They had 4 channels, and you could actually switch your TV. So it was like a really kind of low-grade way of doing, what you can do much more kind of seamlessly with DVD.
There's documentaries like that actually, which should work how you're saying, but they get flattened into making a film. There's a documentary which is about a football match, and it films audiences all around the world, and it just cuts between the different audiences.
Yeah.
But it's a really dynamic idea, and then it gets made really linear, because that's what it's meant to be.
Yeah, yeah. And again, did you see that on DVD, or?
I saw it in a film school library.
Okay, yeah. So it's kind of designed to be. It was designed to be watched linearly, which most things are. So, I think the idea that you can version things to get the most out of a different platform for the film is again another really is another fascinating idea that you can do that.
I was having this conversation with Nesta earlier, and it's the idea that UK people, organisations like the UK Film Council need to understand the format of film doesn't necessarily have to be linear. Because I recently approached them for a grant and got through by being very cheeky, by challenging that concept that they're only ever interested in features.
Yeah.
Because they want to talk about a success that they've had globally that's a linear format. And actually what we want is innovation in format and everything, in the distribution and everything. The problem is when you start getting into discussions around this kind of format, is that when are you creating, is it the future of film? Is it a new genre? Is it a different format? And I've just come out of the workshop about social entertainment, and I do not see that as film. It's not film to me. But I understand where film plays its role as one of the many medias. And when you were talking about the stuff in the public realm and looking at it on different screens, again, I can see its role, but to me that's not film. Whereas light surgeons, DQs, and these things you're talking about, innovation in film. That's not to say that it has to have a linear format. But I think there needs to be some separation in thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just like to throw that out there.
No, I think you're right.
I put on these film screenings, they're like these interactive film screenings.
Yeah.
And the Film Council, no one will fund it because the Film Council say, well, I don't need the money actually for the film. And the Art Council reject it too because I want the money for say sound and different sculpture and all this cross media.
But you're delivering an experience, and I'm in that realm to a degree as well.
Experience.
But that's not film, and they can't market it worldwide that way.
I know that the Arts Council won't do it either because they say it's a film event.
I think it's kind of a question as well about structures, isn't it? It's like the structures that are designed to kind of support that aren't flexible enough, or haven't caught up with the way that they stifle the innovation to a certain extent if they're in a particular framework. So.
Well, I look at things like that because I've been looking at what Future Shorts have been doing as well with their kind of living cinema. And to me, in a way, it's between experiential, which is what brands want, and participation theatre. Because ultimately, once you step out of the screen and onto a stage, you're talking about theatre, that might be a better place to find funding. Just as an idea for you.
I didn't want to talk about funding. There's so many kind of sessions about kind of funding and stuff. It's like, but I could, I'm totally with you on it, and it's not a chicken and egg situation, but it's a really difficult situation because if you're talking about opening up your content, there's you can open it up from like if you've got a traditional film, you can open up your content in terms of a promotional level, and then that probably works for the funder or whatever. But as soon as you actually start applying it to the primary thing, and you open up kind of the artistic possibilities of, you know, of cinema or, you know, the moving image or whatever, then it's kind of outside a mindset. So that's, you know, that's the difficulty of innovation, isn't it?
That's part of what we're all trying to bridge here, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're trying to attend all these workshops and understand all these different levels and try to find where the bits of all those things are. If we're filmmakers or whatever creators we are, versus the industry or the new industry that's trying to either grapple with changes or create new ways of being. All of these things fit together, hopefully when we disappear and innovate.
Yeah. I think it's also a question of it's a question of do you want to engage with that though? Do you want to maybe, you know, look at some of these ideas and use it to actually use those innovations in the form to make them work for you or to make them work for your project, so it can stand out as a project, like maybe one, so it can stand out. It's not competing against, so it becomes like a USP for your project. So I think that's another thing. But if you just want to engage with the kind of traditional form, then that's fine, because you can go through, but then you've got all the problems of that. But you can still do things around the fringes to extend the cinematic stuff, which is, I guess, what you were talking about in terms of social media and stuff. But then you're not kind of opening up the artistic possibilities of it, but you're opening up the kind of promotional upside of.
Absolutely, that a lot of what I'm hearing even from the creators is really marketing. It's getting out there, the distribution. They're talking about being seen, and in a way, because they've removed the barriers to marketing their own product, they think they're really innovating. They're using technology in really interesting ways, but they're doing what marketers have done for years, and that's give stuff away to get contagion. And it's nice being in this group because it's very different. Your approach is very different. It's just exploring where the medium can go, and I think that's really valid. I think there's always that question in the back of your mind: is okay, what is marketing? What is moving it on? What is new genre? And what is the future of film? That's kind of where I'm at with it, really.
Yeah, but I think you can have, I think you can have both of those things. I don't think it's separate. Like what you do with, part of your marketing. The strongest part of your marketing could be something which is different and which is innovative about, what you've done with your project. So that is part of your marketing, and it's also part of the project because it really works for it and it's an integral part of it.
Yeah.
So you can get more standout for it, not in terms of just promotional level, but in terms of actually people getting more out of the experience and maybe building more of a cult around the content, or even a cult around yourself as kind of as a filmmaker or as a personal brand or whatever. I mean, that's a whole different kind of area.
It's the merging of the marketing and the creativity, which is what we see at base level in things like Pop Idol, isn't it?
About in terms of
base level, merging marketing and creation, and that's what things like Pop Idol do in a very watered down, bland way. They get the audience involved in the creation of the start.
Yeah.
So there's a cult for it.
Is it time to stop? Okay.
We wanted more.
Sorry about that.
How much more of it was there?
Have you got any other examples of films which use different formats within it? Where they mix up the mediums within one film, not as an extra?
Like the most kind of seminal example of that I can think of, which was really early on, was Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone, which is really interesting because it used like anime formats, the kind of Japanese animation, and 3D and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it even used like TV stuff, and it had like a fake TV sitcom as part of the whole narrative. So it was.
Peeping Toms possibly an earlier example where, back in My Little Eye, where someone uses uses the camera as the murder weapon and records the murder, and that's integrated into the film.
Exactly.
Yeah, we got to stop. So let's thank Matt.
Thank you.